I'm a Nigerian of my Nigerian origin. I was born in Nigeria and I grew up in Nigeria. So I did some of my formative years in Nigeria. So my primary school, and before my family moved to the UK. Uh, and
Mm.
my house is where I grew up, and well, we grew up in this um, little town, an estate, a sort of housing development off like the east side of Lagos. So it was like
Okay.
at the end of a motorway that goes into the city center, Lagos city center.
Hmm.
So it's very like removed from the, the sort of now very popular scenes of what the hustle and bustle of Lagos, and things you see on TV, and or you probably have seen when Rem Koolhaas went to Lagos. So that sort of conception of Lagos isn't what I grew up in. It was very sort of quiet,
Hmm.
Okay.
super super like sort of suburban, actually not
Uh,
sort of, very suburban
okay, gotcha.
a town. Um, and yeah, but I still had that sort of relationship with the chaos of Lagos, and there's you step outside and there's just that sort of proximity to like proximity to like poverty and extreme wealth. You can
I
see
see.
both sides,
Interesting.
and that obviously touches you in some ways. Moving to the UK, I grew up in South London, but I support a North London team. Don't tell anyone about that. Uh, and again, it's very suburban. It's like setting, and
Hmm.
uh, and I think it was only until I moved to Sheffield and got to see a different world. Uh, not not too that was very dissimilar to what I grew up in, that I started to open my eyes as to what I wanted. And also going into university, I remember always really was very intrigued about like deconstructivism and that sort of that postmodernist movement. I don't know when it was started. I think in the 1980s period, that sort of like new age baroque movement where straight lines was like a sin. And I think that was maybe that growing up in these more manicured, straight suburban um, places sort of made me yearn for something extraordinary.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm also wondering what was the reason for moving from Nigeria to South London? And it sounds like both are kind of suburban places, but they must have been quite different culturally beyond that.
Yeah, it's my parents. It's they in some ways very much economic migrants. Better
Mm.
lives for their children, new better job opportunities, and things like that. So, they had always had that in mind, and you know, we just followed along. I think it was actually something. I remember when they pitched it to us. It was something super exciting. We get to see snow. Uh, So yeah, we were very excited as kids. We were very excited to actually go there, and we did. I remember we did a couple of like trial sessions,
Hmm.
because my parents have siblings and family across the world, actually, in London, in Belgium,
Mm.
and things like that, and we went. I remember we went to Belgium for like a summer, a really long summer, and we went to the States as well. So we tried a different, we tried different. We were shopping around,
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's smart. That's smart.
and they chose London, and we followed.
So you arrive in London, and it sounds like you were there kind of just before high school. I don't know what it's
Yeah,
called.
yeah,
Okay,
secondary school. Yeah,
secondary school. Okay.
yeah,
Um, and so at what point? And you studied at Sheffield
yeah.
University of
University chef.
Sheffield.
Yes.
So how did you decide that architecture was going to be something that you pursued? How were you exposed to it? Did you have a relative that was an architect, or?
No, I was just fascinated by it all.
Huh.
Uh, and I was pretty good at there's a few things that I was good at. I was good at maths because and also my parents are very much academics, so you kind of had
Oh.
to not have to, but it was the unsaid rule that you'd have to do something professional
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
as a child of an immigrant. You I think it would have been a hard sell if I said I wanted to be an actor or something. I think
Yeah, sure, sure.
uh,
What did your parents do? What did your parents do?
my parents they're both academics, so my dad is a professor now in a university back in Nigeria, and my mom had been taught in secondary schools most of her life.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to
So,
be like a tattoo artist. It's an interesting choice.
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So,
So there was that. I mean, I had to be grounded in a little bit of reality, in what I was good at, and again, being the middle child, I think, the other guys, my siblings had chosen very, it's seemingly anyway, very straight and narrow stuff. So my brother's a doctor, my sister, she's a teacher, and she does maths and further maths, and she's all about innovation and whatnot. And I was that person who wanted to be more creative.
mhm.
And I think art and architecture and that sort of mixture between, creativity and analytics and problem solving. Well, something that was really resonated with me was that the fact that there's an end product to what you do.
Hmm.
And you get to see at firsthand the fruits of your labor, uh,
Yeah.
which was very attractive to me. And I think also I remember doing a few. I remember doing a few like not away days, but summer camps and things at
Mm.
University of Cambridge and all these other places, and and also being mentored by a few other people, and they were like, yeah, no, you should do that. You should, it's different. And again, going back to this whole like doing something different and going away from the sort of suburban life was something that really resonated and I was attracted to.
Hmm. That's great. I'm not familiar with the University of Sheffield so much. What was it like studying there?
It was, I think, in retrospect, I think it was a very grounding university. They focused on like the human scale.
Mm. Hmm.
Is like architecture for people, and I think that has you can there's a thread and then the influence in what I'm doing as president here to try to understand and make other people understand that architecture, the reason why you do architecture is to enhance people's lives,
Hmm.
and to make people live a life just a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
And that focus on that subject matter was very, very much apparent in Sheffield in comparison to other schools, which, there's more of a some schools are very focused on the technology, some schools are very focused on the drawing and like the communication
Hmm.
element to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Sheffield was very much like city-based, socially driven architecture.
Yeah, that's fascinating. You're right. There are a lot of different types of schools, and everyone kind of finds their own paths. But I will say, personally, for me, I remember now back when I was an undergrad, there were some studios that were so heavily form based, and I always had, as a student, challenges with that because I just couldn't understand like where this is coming from.
Yeah.
And I was always left wondering like, but how does this affect like anybody who lives here? And that seemed to be in that particular studio like not the focus. Didn't do so well in that studio.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, and I think, I mean, I think all of it is part of what architecture is, and I don't think it's like one or the other. I think because it's an active course, an active discipline. You do have to think about the form, and then you have to think about people who live in that set form, and you have to think about how it functions and all that consideration. And yeah, maybe there should hopefully going forward there will be more universities that consider all three of them with equal measure.
Yeah, I agree. It's also really hard to do, and depending on the university level. But you know, if you're dealing with a 19-year-old, sometimes it's just a lot to architecture, right? Like it's all the stuff you mentioned, and then probably another 4 different factors and avenues to study.
Yeah,
and they all come together in like one piece of art. It's like it's kind of complicated.
It is,
and it takes time to figure that out. One of the questions that I do like asking guests is: was there anything about the architectural education that surprised you, or it was different from maybe any expectations you had or didn't have?
So something that immediately surprised me was how very not so good I was at it. And in undergrad, I was I was really upset with myself and like, why don't I get it? Why can't I draw a stair properly? Because I went to school at uni in like the late to early 2000s, 2010. So it was like that sort of cusp between drawing by hand and then moving on to like sort of BIM and CAD and things like that, using it quite openly and freely. So there was still some assignments that you got given. Like I remember that I think the first semester, one of the first ones in the first semester about like drawing a stair, and you think, oh, a stair is so easy. And you're drawing by hand with like the set squares and stuff and a pen and pencil and then line weights. Oh God, it was Jesus. That was so like, and also making it neat as well. It's just so frustrating. And that was like, I just realized how terrible you are at it all. Almost that sort of section of it is quite opening, and I really focused a little bit more on like the written stuff. So like when you had to like write about how you feel or what you thought about a particular subject matter. That's what I think what I focused on in that first year. So yeah, that's what I found particularly, if I remember correctly.
Great. Yeah.
Are you better at stairs now, or is it still?
No. So Revit and BIM just draws it for you, so it's great. Never again.
That's funny.
It was the same for us. We were kind of like at the cusp of the hand drawing and where the technology started to be more and more present in school. And I have to say, I think we probably. It was probably a good thing that we were in school at that moment because we got to experience both. I honestly can't imagine being a student now and just basically learning the computer. Like, like my brain wouldn't develop in the same ways.
I know, right? Well, there's pros and cons, and I think now they have AI.
Yeah,
and then I remember I went to one of the end of year shows, and a guy, one of the guys was showing me around, who was like, "Oh, this was done by AI." I'm like, "Wow, it's there," and that's good. I was surprised, but also pleased by the fact that the schools are embracing these new technologies quite early on.
The AI thing is obviously the 2 letters everyone likes to say these days, and I think in architecture it's tricky because it is a very powerful it's very powerful already, and it's going to become exponentially more powerful in the next like 5 years.
Yeah.
But I would agree. I mean, like all of us as a profession and as the academia has to think about like what it means and interface with it. I think probably the worst thing we can do is ignore it.
Ignore it. Yeah, definitely. And I think we are at RIBA, again, just not to just jump straight into what RIBA are doing, but we have an expert advisory group this year, which I helped set up, and we are researching with the help of other experts across the industry about how to integrate and use AI, and also help us as an organization, as the Institute for Architecture, to guide our approach going forward. What we need to be saying to our members, what we need to say to the architecture profession when it comes to AI. So yeah, we look forward to the report that comes to council at the end of the year, and then what the recommendations are and how we implement them.
Yeah, fascinating. Fascinating also because it's an probably with all technology, digital technology these days, it's something that moves so quickly and evolves so quickly that it takes quite a bit to stay up to speed with just what's happening. So you're in school, you finished. Oh, by the way, I love the story of like you struggling to draw stairs, because I think that's actually maybe not stairs specifically, but the struggle that students have when they start architecture school, even all the way through it perhaps, is pretty common. And I actually think that it's almost exactly what most people don't expect, especially in the millennial and younger generations. You come out of high school, you know, you get all A's or whatever it is. You get to architecture school, and the first assignment, they're like, fail. It's the wrong line weight, or it's the fuzzy lines. You're like, what? You know?
I drew the line.
Yeah. I don't like your design.
Not
try
good
again.
enough. Sorry, try again.
Yeah, exactly. It can be a tough transition.
It's a very tough transition. And then also, I think what's also quite debilitating as well, sort of adding salt to the injury, is the fact that some people are actually quite good at it, because they did, I don't know what they did, but like they did something at secondary school, or their parents were in arts or architecture, so they're already exposed to it, and it was just like, oh, okay, well, I gotta step my game up.
Yeah. I do remember having some classmates who were just, for whatever reason, they were really good. Yeah. And they would just show up. They would do the assignment in like half an hour and show up, and everyone loves what they do. I'm like, this is
so unfair.
It's so unfair. Like, come on, give me some of that. Whatever you have. What is it?
Or like model making, you know, you could see the kids that were really struggling at cutting the cardboard and like gluing it very cleanly, and others who didn't have that much issues. Good times.
I had one friend who is still my friend, actually. He was really good at like BIM, like or CAD and BIM. And he's just like into games and things, and he just did, even that stair drawing that we were asked to do, I think he did it on CAD first, and then just like traced it. I was like,
what's his name?
Very resourceful.
And I was like, oh,
that's funny.
What? You could do that? And we had to like project lines and stuff. Oh god, I remember that.
Vanishing points.
Oh,
those things. Yeah. I don't know if like perspectives are taught or required anymore to that degree.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
So, and then you end up getting a master's in architecture.
Yeah.
Also wondering what prompted you to get a master's instead of just finishing with the BA and, you know, practicing right afterwards.
Yeah, I think I was very sort of laser focused on achieving the title architect. That was one of my main goals. And if you had the goal, I've had a goal since I was like 16, 17 years old to be an architect. And part of wanting to be an architect again was the fact that you knew what you were going to do, and then that getting the title, getting on the register, in my view, and still remains my view, that it's the stepping stone to the rest of your life. It's like it's not the end goal, but like one of the many goals of your career. And when I talk to students and the next generation, I always tell them that who always think, oh, maybe I should do 2 years out, or maybe, I'm sort of pontificating about the whole course. And again, having some of the doubt that I had, I always just say, just do it. Just do it as quickly as possible. Get to the register, and then the rest of your life begins. So that's what I was going for. That's why I was doing it. I wanted the rest of my life to begin once I get to the register. But if I think about it, I think I would have gone to a different school. Although I had a fantastic time at Sheffield, I just think, I think it would widen my exposure and to like what it is, how to create better architecture, have more and broader influences, a plethora of influences. So I think that's one thing I would have changed, but not changed knowing of the MA.
Yeah.
So the degree in the UK works similarly as it does in the US. You do a 5-year and then like a master after that.
Well, typically, it depends. Yeah.
No. Well, do you want to go on, David, or do you want
No, please.
All right.
Please.
Well, it's in 3 parts. So it's RIBA part 1, part 2, and part 3. And it's the part 1 is your equivalent to your undergrad, which is 3 years.
Yeah.
Part 2 is a post-grad master's, which is 2 years.
Okay.
And then the part 3 is I can't remember what the official postgraduate diploma, which is 1 year. And sometimes I think RIBA's course is it can be 9 months to however long you want to make it. So,
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's actually similar. I went to school in France. I think it's the same system we do. You can stop after 3 years, but I think most people go up to 5, and then eventually you do like 1 more year of kind of working, going to seminars, and then being able to get your license.
Yeah.
I see. So
So it's a bit different.
It's a bit different
than
than the
US,
United States. So the 1 year, the third leg, which is 1 year, which is structured by RIBA, is. It's not like a school that you go to. It's more like seminars and courses here and there mixed in with, I assume you're practicing at the same time.
Yes, you're practicing at the same time.
Okay.
And it's the core is about how to like run a practice. And it asks you I think the goal is to like question what the role of an architect is. And like what type of contracts and what procurement methods, and you through case study how you would deal with things as an architect in a sort of make-believe world, but also trying to use examples from your work experience, things that you're doing right now.
That's interesting. It sounds a little bit different from what happens in the States. This is like the most interesting part of the conversation, I'm sure, to people. Whatever. In that, well, the most typical route is you get either 5 years of education or 6 years, depending on what that is. Then afterwards, you can become licensed, or actually you can become licensed during that. But the equivalent of the third leg, the third chapter, is a series of exams. I think there's like 6 exams now.
Yeah.
But
Fun
the content...
times. Fun times.
Yeah, fun times. But the content of what's covered in those exams is... If you ask any architect, they would tell you it's not really any way to measure whether or not you'll be a decent or good or great architect.
Yeah.
Or not even a good architect as a business person. Yeah. It's pretty removed from reality, some of this stuff.
It's kind of a hodgepodge of questions too. It's not just about, practice and working with clients and contracts. It's a mix of codes and local regulations. And, it's kind of strange.
It's not
honestly.
very useful, is what I'm saying.
It's expensive. It takes forever. It's exhausting, and
is it multiple choice really as well?
Anything.
Because I think a friend of mine I met in summer. She lives in Chicago now, and she was telling me, "Oh yeah, I just finished my exams. It was such a stress. And I'm like, wow. And it's just telling me it's multiple choice. I thought I had misremembered it. But yeah, yeah, we don't, well, the one that I did at RIBA because variety of schools also do it. But the RIBA version of it is, it's like scenario based question. So,
Yeah.
It has this really long, basically sometimes mostly an email or memo, like a mock email that has come
Huh.
to your door or to your desk, and you're like, this has happened and this has happened and this has happened, and everything is going crazy in that office
Yeah.
that day,
Yeah,
and your
yeah.
boss is gone. What do you do?
I like that. That's like role playing. That's exciting.
Like, well, I'm taking the day off. I'm going home.
That sounds more enticing than sitting in a room for 3 hours where there's construction going nearby and the ACs makes it like 50 degrees and you're trying to answer a multiple choice that's not a trick question, but really it is a trick question. Anyway, so you finished at Sheffield, then you practiced for a while at Grimshaw, and then a few other places doing kind of different things.
Yeah.
It sounds like a mixture of different things.
Yeah. I mean, I started bread and butter stuff, more housing developments, regeneration, mixed use developments, in a practice in Birmingham, and that was exciting. And also, again, I remember lots of like, um, again, we were in that period of like BIM and and doing things using CAD, right? And I remember getting so frustrated when we had to do these sort of tall buildings and do the room data sheets and things like that. So the areas, the floor areas, calculated how many units are in the building, versus how big they are, the total GIA, and such like. And then because we're in this sort of weird stage of doing stuff by BIM, but also doing it sort of jailbreaking the BIM. If you change something, you kind of had to like change the Excel, the calculations again, and that was like a manual process. I just remember that was very stressful. But and then it was sort of working with other people, especially when we started getting BIM folks, BIM specialists indoors, working with them to help build the capability on the architecture side to make sure that we're not just, doing stuff because it's quicker to do, and then basically creating more redundant processes. But I think, yeah, part of learning was learning how to do these sort of high-rise design, housing design, but also I was very fascinated by the sort of the technical process parts of it all. And then I moved on to Grimshaw, and then I moved on to where I am right now, Mace.
Gotcha. Interesting. The and for a brief period, I think you were involved with Modulor.
Yeah.
Is that right? And
Yeah.
that was more of a digital computer technology kind of company.
Yeah, yes, it was. It was. So it's something that myself and my friend we started a few years ago. Now it's wound down, but we were very fascinated by the idea of using digital twins in architecture and how we can make that a thing, especially on a sort of residential scale when people are doing the housing remodel, and we started with a question about like what information does an ordinary person have about their home, and how can we help give them that information to help them do anything they want to do with their house. It turns out that not that many people want it. They just want. I mean, my sister is doing a refit of her kitchen and bathroom and stuff, and she couldn't care less about any drawing. So,
My dad is similar, so I feel you.
I was wondering, what does the term digital twins mean?
So it's like a replica of a digital replica of your physical space,
I see.
and basically it's an up-to-date model or up-to-date series of information of everything about your physical asset. So the floor to ceiling heights, the doors, door heights, widths, lintels, and all that stuff. Like
Hmm.
that, keeping that all up to date in the digital space. That's what we're trying to do. And
Interesting.
not many people wanted to pay for it.
Well, you started it on your own with your friend, which is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
That's a tough thing to do in that
Yeah.
space. It actually reminds us that what you're describing is one of our current sponsors does that, but they don't focus on houses. Mostly they focus on large scale, like commercial buildings, where those buildings and people who occupy them need to know,
Yeah.
what's going on. And
Yeah.
this is, real, not necessarily a brand new idea, but yeah, this is what they're attempting to do
Yeah.
with quite success. But it's tough. It's a very different space from architecture. I mean, it's
Yeah.
related to architecture, but it's a different thing. That
Yeah.
whole business.
Business of of architecture is something. And I think what something that fascinates me as well is just that, you know, how architects can use their skills across the built environment is something that I'm very fascinated on, and I want to encourage as much more architects to build and design different types of architecture service businesses outside of just the traditional boutique design consultation service.
Gotcha. So you're thinking possibly even things like digital products,
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah, anything. If it has anything to do with the built environment and servicing the built environment, how do you do that? It doesn't.
Hmm.
I think gone are the days that uh, you know, I believe like if you want to be the next Norman Foster or Richard Rogers, I don't think you're going to be doing what if you're doing exactly what they're doing, you're not learning from them in some ways. So you need to think a little bit differently. Yeah.
I like that. That's well
a good
said.
approach. Yeah, I like that too.
Because specifically Rogers, I mean Norman Foster too, or Lord
Lord Foster.
Lord Foster.
Yeah.
Lest we forget his title.
We don't have titles like that here.
No, we don't.
We should.
But in the early days, like they did some pretty radical work. They were
Yeah.
kind of they
were
were
disruptors,
radicals.
yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
It's kind of sometimes hard to remember that. I think now that they're so established.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean they even their style was so different. And I remember there's a documentary about them. I think there's this. I think I watched it a few years ago now, so I don't really exactly remember, but I think one of them said something about like the reason why they went to AA or something was because it was the only school that was teaching about like nothing to do with it was teaching modernism, and it wasn't always about like this sort of classical or neoclassical baroque type of style of architecture. And
Mhm.
that was one of the reasons why they chose where they wanted to go to, because they wanted something different. And like you said, it's easy to forget that was totally rad.
It
Yeah.
was. Well, I think this is going on a tangent, but I think Rogers, who did he work? It was Rogers and Piano who did the Pompidou Center.
Yeah.
I mean, they won that competition and they were like 23 or something
kids.
insane.
Yeah, in the
Yeah.
20s. Yeah.
Yeah. And their proposal, of course, is crazy. And it's crazy by today's standards. Whenever I see the building, I'm like, this is an insane building. I don't know. It's an insane building.
Everything, like the structure,
Yeah.
the architectural language,
Yep.
the place in which it's built. If you
Yeah.
look around, nothing looks like that.
Nothing looks
you
like
know?
it. And then half of it is public space as well. Half of
Yeah.
the site is what like
Yeah.
it's very radical.
So I'm also wondering, how does one graduate from school, practice at a few places? You have Mace, which is a consultancy.
Construction consultancy, yeah.
Exactly. And now you're president of RIBA.
Yeah.
So
How did that happen?
Yeah, now I'm president of RIBA. How did that happen? It happens because you you seize the moment, right? Carpe diem and all that stuff. Uh, and there is this like window of opportunity, and then there is there's an issue that needs to be brought through that window, which is the issue about like sustainability of early career practitioners in architecture,
Mm-hmm.
and like overtime pay was an issue that in 2020 everyone was talking about, especially during the COVID period, and that
Yeah.
sort of feeling that young emerging practitioners who were in the early years were being mistreated, and it was up to someone. I thought it had to be the institute that represents architects to address the issue head on, and the opportunity came on that the president, the role of presidency was up for nomination. So, working with a group that supported me and a couple of friends um, who also were pushing me to do it, and sort of like encouraging me to do it, saying, you should, you've talked about this, because again, if you bring any two or three architecture students or early career architects together, they're always complaining about the same thing, and this
Mm-hmm.
was an
Mhm.
opportunity to make sure that the thing that we generally just like take for granted and complain about, so we are actually trying to suggest solutions for it, as opposed to just perennially being agitated by it. So that's how it
Yeah.
came about. But the process of getting on the ballot and getting here is that you have to have 60 members of the institute back you,
Huh.
and
Wow.
to get you to the main ballot. So that was a scramble. And then by when you get on the ballot, you then have to campaign on issues that you care about. And I mean, I thought that the idea about advocating for a more sustainable built environment in a meaningful way is necessary. The idea to bring fairness and diversity into what we do and how we do it is necessary, and the general welcoming of technological evolution in design and construction practices, whether it's via AI, BIM, in the profession, is necessary. And those are the three things that I really care about. I really cared about passionately, and about 2,000, 3,000 people also cared about it, so voted for me.
That's
That's
amazing.
amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, you ran a campaign and all of that. That's
Yeah.
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 So how does after you have 60 people who are backing you, and then
Hmm.
you can move on to the next phase, I guess, or the
Hmm.
next kind of area. And you said you have to present and discuss issues. How does that take place? Like, what is the format? Is there a
Is there a
blog? Is
debate?
there are you
Yeah.
standing behind a podium on stage? Like, how does it work?
Yeah, so I was somewhat not lucky, but it helped in some ways that we were just coming out of lockdown and COVID and things. So most people were online, and we were still doing things online predominantly.
Mm-hmm.
So there were there was a focus on being online, and you could get a big enough crowds in like those ginormous Zoom meetings, and
Hmm.
I think that helps. So the organization puts together hustings, which is kind of like campaign hustings, like you would see in any sort of presidential or gubernatorial campaign. And there were three of them, and outside of those three, there are other things you had to do. So whether it's on social media or in person, you just sort of go and talk to as many people as possible, as many different architectural practices and offices as possible on your campaign manifesto points. And before I forget, you also had to submit. There's submittal, which is your CV and your yeah, your manifesto pack, like about
I see.
2,000 word, like why you should be considered for the role. So that's the basis of for which you are judged on, really.
Interesting. Do you have to debate other architects?
It wasn't
Or is
really
it?
wasn't really that much of a debate. It was more of it was like question and answer sessions to the audience. And
Huh.
I don't know whether it was a new thing for my year, but I don't think in previous years, I remember seeing videos of debates, but my year, I didn't get to do a debate. I got to do like hustings, which are a fancy word for like interviews.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then so I don't know, we're asking all these questions about how it works, but so does it come down to a vote of all the RIBA members
Yeah.
or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it
Wow.
is.
That's really cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I think it's great that I feel like we totally resonate with what you were saying as younger professional. Like a lot of us are complaining about all of those things, but ultimately it's what do you do to make it change
Yeah.
besides complaining. So I think it's great that if you do feel strongly about something, that you actually take action and try and get into one of those positions
Yeah.
that could make a difference.
Yeah,
Um,
get it on the get a seat at the table, and
Mhm.
ask the questions, and hope and hopefully get people to take it seriously, which
yeah.
the RIBA is taken seriously.
So what does your day-to-day responsibility or role looks like for RIBA in the position you're in?
And you're still running Mace at the same time.
I'm not running Mace. I work with
Sorry,
Mace.
working. Yeah.
Not yet. He's
Not
on,
yet,
he's on the
anyway.
campaign.
Yeah, what does my day-to-day look like? I think it's varied, but the cool thing is of the core role of a president is two things really. It's to be the chair of council, which is an elected body, and ensure that the expert advisory groups, so the insights gathered from the membership and other places, are being funneled through the organization, and the organization is current on issues, right? So issues when we're talking about issues to do with fairness, and to issues to do with sustainability and built environment. What's that body of knowledge? How are we refreshing the body of knowledge within the institution, within the organization? And again, it is to and as a president as well, you are a board of trustee. There's a title called ex officio. It's Latin. I forget what the Latin meaning is. Basically, you're just sort of like you're transported into the board to
Mhm.
sit on the board as well, to give oversight on how the organization performs, and what the organization what the priorities of the organizations are, and help influence that. And you work alongside the executive team. So Max is on the executive team, and the CEO and others about how the organization works for the members. And then outside of that, those core roles is doing more advocacy work. So working with the policy and public relations teams to be the face of the organization to the public. So whenever we have any public engagement activity, you're there. If you have an award ceremony like our Sterling Prize, which is one of the big awards for architecture in the UK, and I'd probably say globally, the best again this last couple of days we just released a shortlist for the six shortlist for 6 number projects that were shortlisted for the RIBA Sterling Prize. Again, you are the host on that day for the Sterling Prize event, and I think what we've learned is that the one thing that our members, above everything else, one thing our members want from an organization, which was set up almost 200 years ago, is that we should be advocates to government, local and national, about the concerns of the built environment, because not one architecture practice or studio can do it on themselves. They can't they can't like sit on roundtables with the government when it comes to housing and planning, or when it comes to infrastructure design and things like that. So they want the RIBA to be the vocal voice, leading the charge and ensuring that the needs and the issues that architects are facing are being addressed by stakeholders in the built environment. So that's one thing that, as a president, you do.
Interesting. I find it really, really fascinating. Second?
It sounds like a
small
task.
Yeah, it sounds easy.
It's very easy.
There's something you said earlier about, it was sort of related, or it reminds me of this. You said something about architects having a seat at the table, and I forget what part of the conversation that was, but it reminded me that I think, and this also ties into you saying architects feeling, younger architects feeling the options to do different things potentially outside of just traditional architecture, and venturing into kind of the space that you're describing, more like public policy, let's say, is super critical, and having organizations like RIBA and yourself is critical. I also think it'd be great, I'm biased as an architect, but it would be great if more architects, good ones, ended up in positions where they are basically government officials and they're working public policy on that side of the table or that side of the line. I think that would be really great.
I think so too. I think anything that touches the built environment, wherever it is, I think it'll one of my messages, and if you read my monthly columns at the RIBA J, just
nice plug.
Another plug here, go for it.
So harmless plug there. I talk about things that the issues I think affecting architects, but also what I think architects could and should be doing about it. And one of my recent columns that I really enjoyed writing, and also got quite a lot of positive feedback, was this one that I called "We Can't All Be Artists." And it's just this sentiment that, when I was in university, the idea of being that lone architect, sketching the future skyline and doing all this fancy stuff, that's what I grew up with, and I think, well, yes, you can do that, and there should be architects who do that, but also you should sort of, there needs to be a sort of plurality of like what it is, accept the plurality of what it is to be an architect, whether it is at a typically design focused practice, whether it is, like you said, David, you're in policy making side of things, whether it is even you're working at a technology company and the designing the tools that architects use to make good architecture. I remember this conversation I had with one of my friends and colleagues about the fact that, if you using BIM or using Revit or something, the fact that you have to draw everything in plan first before you actually get to see it in section and things like that really affects how you think about the design. Because you're like, well, does it work in plan first, as opposed to, whether in comparison to when you're using Rhino, like there's a more sculpting format, and that's probably influenced by the people who designed the software, and influences how you design things. So I think my encouragement is for architects to seize this opportunity, but also make it legitimate in our ecosystem that, a good architect works in a design practice and other things too.
Yeah. There's definitely a feeling in a lot of schools that if you're not that artist or you don't have the capacity, that you should just kind of give up. And it's not true, obviously. And even in a traditional architecture practice, there's a lot of different roles that one can be in. I like that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like the role model that's being presented to, I think, any architecture student is being the architect who's going to get published and studied in school, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of almost, it's interesting because I think it's just a matter of awareness. Like when I was in school, I had no idea that an architect could be ending up in doing all those kinds of, jobs after graduation.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't all have to be just designing buildings, and I just was never aware of that. And I'm thinking, if you had like a lecture or two in a school, just for students to be aware of their possibilities,
Mm-hmm.
you probably would limit like the failing rates and dropping out rates of students leaving schools, because they can make models, like they just don't have the capacity to do that, but they could be really good at doing something else within architecture.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a waste, because they came into architecture for a reason at the beginning. They had to leave probably because of the wrong reason.
Mm-hmm.
And it just seems like if you just had given them the information for them to know which route to go, you could have opened up like a new door, a new branch within architecture for someone to explore.
Yeah.
The point about the different tools that architects use is a really good one too, because now there's really only like 4 programs that exist, and it's like everyone uses the same ones.
Yeah.
And it's probably a good question of like, how does that impacting what we're doing?
Yeah.
I want to ask you, this is a small question of, what do you think some of the, well, you probably already listed it, but some of the biggest issues facing architects, the profession of architecture, or this architecture as a whole, and what are some of the ways you think that architects, the boots on the ground, so to speak, can do to help aid those issues or combat those issues at that level compared to what you're doing, which is, I don't want to say above because it sounds hierarchical, but you're kind of in a different
Big picture.
different space with RIBA, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is it being underpaid? Is it what is it? It's probably a bunch of stuff.
It is. It's quite a lot of things. I think first thing is one of the biggest challenges is accessibility to the profession and that retention rate. Again, at council, when we had a debate about workplace and well-being, we got a few professors from different architecture schools to give us like a grounding of like what picture are they seeing in terms of retention, in terms of people going on to the register, graduating, and all that sorts of thing. And one fact that really struck me, but also you kind of know it as well, anecdotally you feel it, is like the amount of women who drop out of the profession is staggering. I can't remember the exact, especially in UK anyway. It's I can't remember the exact figure, but it was after post, like I think in part 1, undergrad, it's almost 50-50, and then by part 2 you get less women, by part 3 even less, and then like 2 years in even less, and then I mean you can tell like maybe it is because women are having children and things, starting families, and that has an effect. So it that sort of making the profession accessible at all stages is something that we just need to address head on, and it's something that I have done. I've just started doing in my term as president, to understand the picture, understand the data from our membership and wider, and when we come together as a group in this institution, figure out what it is, what sort of levers can we pull, what incentives do we need to create, and how do we then create that environment? How do we create the weather to ensure that less and less women and other people of color and other groups get to enjoy and stay in this profession that we really like and really love to do. So that's one thing it's a big challenge. It's a big challenge, because I don't think if you want to create these wonderful places that everyone should live in and thrive in, I strongly believe that it needs to be created by like by diversity of people.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that I can think of is the environmental challenge, climate change, how um, you know, how people, what people specify, the boots on the ground, as you say, what did they specify, and how they use materials, and how they use systems in which we're creating the wonderful environments that we all want to live in. What is it that they're doing so different to help sort of cascade upwards to address the environmental challenge?
Mm-hmm.
And the third thing I'd say is, third and final thing I'll say, I think it's that digital revolution, AI, how has it changed the profession? What do we need to do to adapt to go forward? So those I think are some of the big challenges.
I would say so. I'm. It's interesting the move toward more sustainable ways of practicing and buildings seems it's not an easy path, I wouldn't say, but it seems a bit clearer because it's measurable. We're dealing with the physicality of carbon emissions.
Yeah.
But the first point of kind of retainment and making the profession accessible to historically the minority groups of all different kinds, that's a much more elusive and not as easily quantifiable in terms of how to get there.
Yeah.
So my question is, so like, what are the things you can do to help encourage that? Is it just promoting? I don't mean promoting in terms of like pay and levels, but promoting as in announcing to people who are already in those positions? Is it making, I don't know,
standards for firms to follow? I mean, like, what kind of things?
Because it's going to take time for sure, right? It's not like you can do it overnight.
No, definitely it's not. I mean, but the challenge is that there are groups like Women in Architecture who have been around for quite a long time, and they've been talking about it. So I think it's that sort of collaboration across the aisle, across different groups. But also, I do think there needs to be like carrots and sticks. And yeah. And I don't want to like sort of preempt what we're going to do post the data collection that we've gathered over the past year. But I think there needs to be a sort of, like you're saying, some sort of a charter that practices sign up to. I see lots of businesses around the world wanting to be affiliated with the B Corporation, which is I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's like it's a badge of honor that says that you are sustainable and you do ethical. You have like above standard ethical practices, and basically what that shows is that companies of whatever size and scale want to signal that they are good and people should work with them, people should work for them. And it's a sort of feather in your cap type of thing. And I think an institution like ours should lean into those types of certifications to help practices be better, to ensure that women and other historically minoritized groups feel better when they when they work in with various businesses with various practices. But fundamentally, I think it also then just goes to pay and fees and stuff. We just need to be better at that sort of the economical side of things. And again, something that we're discussing internally at RIBA is like, how do we encourage and help practices and companies and architecture practices just think are more economically savvy, fiscally prudent, how to run better practices and things like that, to ensure that they pay their staff well and such like.
I think that's probably a worldwide issue. I mean, in the States too, it's crazy. Like, you could take 15 firms in the same city and they all charge differently to their clients, and they all run better or less their businesses because they were never trained to run a business, or maybe they're just making the wrong decisions every time, and it just trickles down to their employee and all of that. So it's kind of it's kind of a tricky and global issue, I feel like. I think also in general, architects feel like they are undervalued and underpaid, at least in the US.
Yeah.
And to the way maybe the general public and potential clients also see them. Doctors are always very put up there and paid a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
But architects, it sounds prestigious, but then when it comes to actually pay an architect, it's almost like you have to like fight your way through. It's.
I think everything is related, and I like your point that it is the issues of social equity, let's say, are tied at some point to the economics of an architecture practice. That is 100% true. Because as one gets a little bit older and it comes time to have a family and et cetera, you at some point you realize, oh yeah, I can't survive on 20 grand a year. That's not like viable.
Yeah.
And then that severely limits like potentially where you can work based on et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's all for sure tied together.
Yeah, it is. And I think that I would like to see a more acceptance of that economic security. One part of the reason we want to be in a job and a career that's fulfilling is the economic security, and architecture as a practice needs to embrace that.
I love hearing you say that, because I do think that for a long time that sentiment was almost rejected, and it was almost the opposite. It was kind of like, I don't know, and this is a generalization, obviously, but we're architects. We're above money. We don't concern ourselves with capitalism and things like this, because we're artists and we're change the world. And I think that was very much the mentality. And I think the rejection of talking about money or the economics of a practice was also rejected. And I think it was only, from my view, it was only until very recently, I want to say, the last 10 years, maybe, where it started to be more of a conversation. I do think that our generation, and especially the younger ones, are like, absolutely not. This needs to be a center part of all the conversations that we have.
Yeah. Like it has to stack up, especially because, I mean, I don't want to get super philosophical here, but I don't know how old you guys are, but like my generation, we came into university post global financial crash, and the idea that the comforts of the safety nets that our previous generations took for granted aren't there. It wasn't guaranteed. Meant that there's this heightened sense of we need to our jobs need to feel secure, and we need to make that clear and make that known. And if it's not, we will vote with our feet to move to different places to that ensures that sort of basic need, economic security, is met.
Yep, that makes total sense. That's for sure. This is kind of a tangent, but like on Instagram, I get hit with random stuff sometimes, and I came across this clip of this elder gentleman who's probably boomer age, so maybe in their 60s or 70s, I don't know, something like that. And he's talking about finding wealth, right? You probably see a lot of these things on social media. And he's like, if you imagine if you buy 3 properties by the time you're 30, and then you invest in those properties, you take that money, you resell, and blah, blah, blah. And
that's it. You're a
the
millionaire.
comment section is like, just hold up a second.
How do you buy one property?
Anybody for like 30, 40 and younger is struggling because they haven't thought about buying 3 properties? Bro, none of us can afford to buy anything. That's the problem. Like all of what existed before, that's out the window. That doesn't exist. It's a different reality now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it does make me chuckle sometimes when you see those things, and like, well, just and I did, and one that really frustrates me and also makes me laugh at equal measure is the Amazon drop shipping thing.
Yeah. It's a shortcut. I don't know.
Yeah. But what you're trying to say though is that sort of like the opportunities ordinarily would have been afforded to people of this particular age back in the day aren't afforded to us right now. And that means we need to, we need to make smarter decisions, more logical decisions, outside of I'd say, the decisions about, the reality needs to then be translated into the story that you tell about your life, about what you do and the impact of what you do in the world. I think all of that needs to like marry up together and needs to make sense in different ways. So it's something that I, again, of that generation, want to make aware to everyone that it's not shameful to think about these things.
I love it. I love it. And I think it's also a great example of why it's so important to have people who are of a certain generation, let's say in this particular part of the conversation, but also have certain experiences to be in positions like yourself, because it's a more likely chance that those serious issues are going to be championed and discussed about. It's also that you understand them because you're living them. You're not learning through a poll, but you're part of what's happening. And in fact, a lot of the reasons why the initial motivations for you running for presidency and now becoming president were sort of parallel to why we started the show 8 years ago. We had a lot of friends, probably similar to you, architects. We'd work after work. We'd catch up, and everyone would talk about the same things, like just as you described. And at some point, we were like, we didn't choose to run for the presidency of the AIA, but I thought to myself, like, I think there's a way where we can bottle this up amongst other things and put it out there, and I think it's going to resonate, and it has to everything that you've said.
Yeah, and I mean, your reach it's global now. Because I get to see it as well over here in the UK, and you do lend a voice to the sort of thinking, the rumination in your head, and the fact that other people are talking about and thinking the same way just gives you a little bit more confidence. So yeah, it's great to have things like this out there.
Yeah, a bit more confidence, which is nice. I did have a question. It's super fascinating, RIBA and organizations like this. Is it hard to, how do I phrase this? Is it hard to keep in touch and understand what the, quote, common architects, the average architect is thinking and feeling, to kind of connect and understand that, and then have that information get to you and then turn it into an action item at the RIBA level and space? Because that always is I feel like is one of the common easy complaints with other architecture organizations who will be unnamed in the United States, is that they're just so disconnected from like the practicing architects, and it makes the average practicing architects feel quite a lot of disdain toward this unnamed organization.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why you gotta have the refresh of the president's position. It's every 2 years. But you have you have 1 year to campaign as well. So 1 year, so 3 years in general, in total. But it's that refresh to ensure that the membership and the architecture fraternity, their voice is being heard and is carried through via the office of the presidency. And again, the office of the president has a particular status. It has in the organization, in the profession, in society in general as well. So again, that's one way to do it. And something that I'm gonna want to. People keep asking me about my legacy. One legacy that I want to leave behind is I have asked the executive team to put together a spreadsheet for me, or the spreadsheet for the office of the president, about what regions do we cover. We also have a chapter in USA, by the way. So all our different regions, all the different schools of architecture in the regions that are validated by the RIBA, and all the reoccurring events that happen in said region. And it's like a map of like what the office of the presidency has been engaged, how the office of presidency has engaged in all the different regions. And it's my hope that when I'm in office, I get to see a handful, I get to engage with a handful of the different regions. And if it's a legacy item, the next presidents will pick up where I left off, and so on and so forth. And it'll help to address the issue that, when, like you're saying, the plight of the everyday architect isn't being filtered through to the top of the organization. But if we can continue, we can get this off the ground and continue doing it, it wouldn't just be focusing on a particular region. For us in the UK, it's London. London always gets not bad rep, but it's always like an accusation that, oh, it's very London centric and we're not as engaged across the regions in the UK and in the world. But if we don't have this sort of spreadsheet, this like map of, okay, we have been to Manchester, we've also been to Newcastle, we've been to the Gulf, we've been to the XYZ, and engaged at their reoccurring events. That's one way in which to just demonstrate that we've listened, and although maybe we wouldn't implement everything we listen and we hear and listen to, but the fact that you're there, you're listening, and you're showing up, showing your face, I think it's some reassurance that there's a system in place to do things.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I'd asked you earlier what was the one surprising thing about architecture school, and I'm wondering the same thing about your position as president. What's been something was a surprise or a challenge, or I mean, there must, because the way I kind of view it is it's got to be, based on your description, it's a very different set of responsibilities than being an architect at Grimshaw, for example.
It is. But at Grimshaw, there's, I think, something that prepared me for this role was at Grimshaw, we used to have this thing called Friday at Fives, and it was a Friday at 5. If you were really stressed for time or had a deadline or whatever, we had a what's it called? A big open floor atrium area, and with seating and things like that. And because Grimshaw is an international company as well, we have offices in the Americas, in Australia, and other places. It was a time to share news across the different regions.
Cool.
And I put myself forward to be the newscaster, to read the news from time to time. And yeah, it was a way for me to just like let your head down and just be funny and do funny things. And I really enjoyed it. And I mean, I started off really, really scared about like speaking in public, even though in architecture school you speak in public all the time, you stand up in front of everyone and present to your scheme, however bad it is. But just doing something different, like reading a sheet of paper, was always very scary. But anyway, I got over myself and I did that for a couple of years. And well, what am I trying to say? Well, that prepared me for this role, where you have to talk to people a lot and present ideas quite a lot, ideas that are not based just on architecture to the general public, really.
It's so interesting.
Our last question, because we're coming on the time, is a very easy one. What is your favorite building?
Ooh, that's very hard.
I know.
You sucked me into. I was like, yeah, this is easy, and then it was really hard in the end.
You can have a couple.
I can have a couple. Oh, so when I remember when I was writing my application to university, my favorite building at the time was It was what was it? It was this building by Frank Gehry in the Czech Republic. It's called the Downton House or something like that. And it was basically a reconstitution or a refurbishment of end of terrace museum public building, and the way it sort of like clashed with the existing was something that was, again, like, it's very avant-garde, and I really liked it. But since then I've moved away from deconstructivism in that sort of type of building. And one thing that the one building that really, like, I really like going to, and it's in London, is the Barbican Center. It's a ginormous bit of brutalism in central London. And it shouldn't, I mean, when you look at it, it shouldn't work at all because it's so gray, and London is gray most of the time. But because it has lots of different feelings, lots of different spaces. It has a museum, a cinema. It has some outdoor external green spaces and water features. It's just that, like, bit of central London oasis that you can do a variety of sort of everyday things, from, just meeting your friend to, some of my photos that are professional photo shots have been done in the backdrop of the Barbican.
Nice.
It's just like that sort of everyday, super functional building done in the 60s and doesn't look out of place now in 2024. So
that's amazing. I admit that Barbican is not something I knew by name, and I just looked at it whilst you were speaking. It's a crazy building.
Yeah.
And if England and London is a place on my list to visit for a long time, I will definitely have to see this building.
Yeah, you should go. It's and you can see there's lots of things to see, and you can't see it in one day, and just you can always see from different angles. You get a different impression and expression of it.
I love it. Muyiwa, thank you so much for making the time on a Friday early evening for you, UK time. This was so much fun, and I hope to continue the conversation. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much. It was really enjoyable.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching this video on YouTube. If you like what we're doing, then please support our show by hitting that subscribe button.
You can also find us on most of the social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're mostly on Instagram. And you can reach out to the hotline, 213-222-6950. You can send a text message or leave a voicemail if you have any reaction to this recording, any questions you might have, or guest suggestion. Feel free to send it our way.
Cool. Thank you for watching, and see you next week.
Thanks. Bye-bye.